My name is Patsy, and I'm 58 years old. I thought I knew what happiness looked like until my son's wedding day showed me how wrong I could be. For months, I had been dreaming about dancing with Marcus, seeing him marry the woman he loved, and maybe finally having the daughter I never had. I spent my savings on a beautiful dress, got my hair done at the salon downtown, and even bought new shoes that pinched my feet, but made me feel elegant. I wanted everything to be perfect for my boy. But sometimes the people we love most can surprise us in the cruelest ways. Before I share what happened that day, tell me where you're watching from and hit that like button. You might want to grab some tissues for this one, because what my daughter-in-law did next changed everything. Raising Marcus alone wasn't easy, but it was the best thing I ever did. When his father walked out 15 years ago, leaving nothing but empty promises and unpaid bills, I made a choice. I would give my boy everything I could, even if it meant working double shifts at the flower shop I managed downtown. Our little house on Maple Street wasn't much to look at with its peeling paint and creaky front steps, but it was ours. Marcus never complained about sharing one bathroom or eating spaghetti 3 nights a week. He was grateful for what we had, and that gratitude made me proud. When Marcus started college, I took out a second mortgage to help with his expenses. He studied business administration and worked part-time at a local restaurant to contribute what he could. Those were good years, even though money was tight. He would call me every Sunday night, telling me about his classes, his dreams of starting his own company someday, and eventually about a girl named Madison. Madison came from old money. Her family owned several businesses around town, lived in a sprawling house in the hills, and sent their daughter to private schools her entire life. When Marcus first brought her home 3 years ago, I was nervous but excited. She was beautiful with perfectly styled blonde hair and clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I wanted to love her because my son loved her. During that first dinner, Madison politely complimented my pot roast, but I caught her looking around our small dining room with what I thought was curiosity. Now I realize it was judgment. She asked questions about our neighborhood, about how long we had lived there, about my plans for retirement. At the time, I thought she was just trying to get to know us better. Marcus was glowing with happiness, and that was all that mattered to me. As their relationship grew serious, I noticed small changes in Marcus. He started talking about upgrading his car, mentioned wanting to move to a better apartment, and seemed embarrassed when Madison's friends would suggest expensive restaurants for double dates. I never said anything because I wanted him to be happy, but I worried he was trying to become someone he wasn't, to fit into her world. When they got engaged 18 months later, I cried tears of joy. Marcus proposed at the country club, where Madison's family held their membership, and she said yes, with a squeal that echoed across the golf course. I wasn't there to witness it, but Marcus called me immediately afterward, his voice shaking with excitement. I could hear Madison in the background, already making plans and talking about guest lists. The engagement party was held at the country club 2 months later. I bought a new dress for the occasion, something navy blue with small pearl buttons that I thought looked sophisticated. When I arrived, I realized I was underdressed compared to the other guests, but Marcus hugged me tight and introduced me to everyone as his amazing mum. Madison smiled and kissed my cheek, but there was something distant in her eyes that I couldn't quite identify. During the engagement period, I started setting aside money for their wedding. I cancelled my cable subscription, stopped eating out completely, and even took on extra hours arranging flowers for other people's special occasions. I had saved nearly $3,000 by the time they started serious wedding planning. I knew it wasn't much compared to what Madison's family could contribute, but I wanted to help however I could. The first real warning sign came 6 months before the wedding, when Madison announced she was taking over all the planning details. I had offered to handle the flowers, thinking my 20 years of experience in the business might be helpful, but Madison politely declined. She said they wanted to work with a more upscale florist who understood their vision for sophistication. That word sophisticated became Madison's favorite during wedding planning. Everything had to be sophisticated. The venue had to be sophisticated. The menu had to be sophisticated. Even the invitations had to reflect a sophisticated aesthetic that apparently my input could not provide. Marcus started visiting less frequently during this time. Our weekly Sunday dinners became bi-weekly, then monthly. When I asked if everything was all right, he assured me he was just busy with wedding planning and work. He had gotten a promotion at his marketing firm, which was wonderful news, but it seemed to make him even more distant from our old life together. I tried to be understanding. Wedding planning was stressful, and I remembered how overwhelmed I had felt planning my own wedding decades earlier. But there was something different about the way Madison looked at me now, as if she was trying to figure out how to fit me into their new life without causing too much disruption to their carefully crafted image. The breaking point came during Madison's bridal shower, which was held at her aunt's estate outside town. I had spent hours making homemade cookies and carefully wrapping a crystal vase I thought would be perfect for their new home. When I arrived carrying my modest contributions, Madison greeted me with an air kiss and immediately handed my cookies to a server without even looking at them. Later, when Madison opened gifts, she gushed over expensive kitchen appliances and designer linens from her college friends. When she got to my gift, she held up the vase and said, "How sweet, Patsy. This will be perfect for our guest bathroom." The other women laughed politely, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. It wasn't what she said, but how she said it, as if my gift was charming, but ultimately unsuitable for their main living spaces. After the shower, I drove home and sat in my car outside my house for 20 minutes crying. I felt foolish for thinking I could compete with Madison's wealthy friends, but more than that, I felt hurt by her casual dismissal of my efforts to show love and support. That night, Marcus called to thank me for coming to the shower. When I mentioned feeling a little out of place, he sighed and said, "Mom Madison is just stressed about everything being perfect. She doesn't mean anything by it." But I could hear something in his voice, a tiredness that told me he was making excuses, even to himself. I decided to try harder. I researched etiquette books from the library, practiced holding teacups the proper way, and even signed up for a wine tasting class to better understand what Madison's family might expect from conversations. I bought a new outfit for the rehearsal dinner, something more expensive than I usually allowed myself, and made an appointment at the nicest salon in town for the morning of the wedding. As the wedding approached, I told myself that everything would be different once they were married. The stress would be over, and we could all relax into being a family. I imagined holidays at their new house, helping with grandchildren someday, and having the daughter I had always wanted. These dreams kept me going through the lonely months leading up to their big day. The morning of Marcus's wedding dawned bright and clear, exactly the kind of perfect June day Madison had been praying for. I woke up at 5:30, too excited and nervous to sleep any longer. I had laid out my outfit the night before, an elegant lavender dress with matching shoes and the pearl necklace my mother had given me on my own wedding day. I wanted to look special for my son's most important day. I arrived at the venue 2 hours before the ceremony, hoping to help with last-minute preparations or simply spend some quiet time with Marcus before the chaos began. The country club looked stunning, with white roses and greenery draped along the walkways, and a perfect view of the golf course beyond. Everything was exactly as Madison had envisioned. When I approached the bridal suite to see if I could assist with anything, Madison's mother, Gloria, answered the door. She was a tall, elegant woman who had always been polite but cool toward me. "Oh, Patsy," she said, not opening the door wider. "How nice that you're here early. I think the men are getting ready in the clubhouse if you want to see Marcus." I could hear laughter and chatter behind her, the sounds of bridesmaids helping Madison prepare for her moment. I had hoped to be included in those preparations, maybe to help button her dress or share a quiet moment before she became my daughter-in-law. Instead, I found myself redirected away from the feminine bonding I had imagined. At the clubhouse, Marcus was adjusting his tie in front of a mirror surrounded by his groomsmen. When he saw me, his face lit up with genuine happiness. "Mom, you look beautiful," he said, giving me a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and nervous sweat. For that moment, everything felt right again. This was my boy, the man I had raised to be kind and loving, and today was his day. But even that moment was brief. Madison's father arrived to collect the groomsmen for photos, and I was left standing alone in the empty clubhouse, realizing I had no specific role to play in the day's events. I wasn't part of the wedding party, and I hadn't been asked to participate in any of the traditional mother duties I had seen in movies. When it came time for the ceremony, I discovered that I would be seated in the third row behind Madison's extended family and family friends. I had assumed I would sit in the front row, as is traditional for the mother of the groom, but apparently Madison's large family required all the prime seating. A wedding coordinator with a clipboard politely but firmly guided me to my assigned spot. As the ceremony began, and Madison walked down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my car, I tried to focus on the happiness of the moment. Marcus looked handsome and nervous at the altar, and when his eyes found mine in the crowd, he smiled with the same sweet expression he had worn as a little boy. That smile reminded me why I was there to celebrate my son's happiness, regardless of how uncomfortable I felt. The ceremony itself was beautiful, with Madison's minister speaking about love and commitment, while the afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows. I found myself crying during their vows, remembering the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the prettiest mum in the world. Now he was promising to love and cherish someone else for the rest of his life, and despite my complicated feelings about Madison, I was genuinely happy that he had found love. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception hall for cocktails and dinner. I had hoped to have a few minutes to congratulate the newlyweds, but they were immediately swept away for more photos and greeting-receiving lines of Madison's family and friends. I stood by myself near the bar, sipping a glass of white wine and watching other guests reconnect with people they hadn't seen in years. When dinner was announced, I discovered I had been seated at table 9 near the back of the room with some distant relatives of Madison's that I had never met before. The sweetheart table where Marcus and Madison sat was at the front, surrounded by tables of their closest friends and Madison's immediate family. I felt like I was attending a wedding where I barely knew the couple. The reception continued around me, while I made polite conversation with my table mates, but I felt increasingly invisible as the evening progressed. Madison's college friends dominated the dance floor, and her relatives shared stories and inside jokes that reminded everyone how central they were to the couple's life. I smiled and nodded when spoken to, but inside I felt like an outsider looking in on my own son's wedding. When the band started playing slow songs, I watched couples swaying together under the twinkling lights. I had imagined dancing with Marcus to our special song, "The Way You Look Tonight," which I used to sing to him when he was little. But he was busy with Madison, spinning her around the dance floor, while her family took countless photos of every moment. Finally, during a brief break between dances, Marcus made his way over to my table. "Mom, would you like to dance?" he asked, extending his hand with the same gallant gesture he had practiced as a teenager when I taught him to waltz in our living room. For those 3 minutes, everything felt perfect again. Marcus held me gently and told me how grateful he was for everything I had done to help him become the man he was today. "I love you, Mom," he whispered as the song ended. "Thank you for always believing in me." I felt tears threatening again, but these were happy tears, the kind that come from pure love and pride. But as soon as our dance ended, Madison appeared at Marcus's elbow. "Honey, my cousin Rachel wants to get a photo with us," she said, not acknowledging me at all. Marcus gave me an apologetic look and allowed himself to be led away. I watched them pose for yet another photo, Madison's hand possessively on Marcus's arm, and realized that my moment with my son was over. I retreated to my table and sat quietly finishing my dinner and watching the celebration continue around me. The other guests at my table had found friends at other tables to visit with, leaving me alone with my thoughts and growing sense of displacement. This wasn't how I had imagined my son's wedding would feel. As the evening wore on, I decided it might be time to leave quietly. I had congratulated the couple, participated in the important moments, and fulfilled my obligations as the mother of the groom. Maybe it would be better to slip away before I felt even more out of place among Madison's sophisticated crowd. I stood up to gather my purse and say goodbye to my table mates, but in my haste to be discreet, I accidentally bumped into the chair behind me. It made a scraping noise against the floor, and unfortunately, it happened during a quiet moment between songs when many people could hear the disturbance. Madison turned from her conversation near the sweetheart table, her eyes immediately finding me across the room. Even from that distance, I could see her expression change from celebration to annoyance. She said something to the person next to her and began walking in my direction with purposeful steps. "Patsy," she said when she reached my table, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "Could you please be more careful? This is supposed to be elegant." Her tone was sharp enough that several nearby guests turned to look at us, their conversations stopping as they sensed drama developing. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Madison. I was just trying to leave quietly so I wouldn't disturb anyone further," I said, hoping to diffuse the situation and escape gracefully. But Madison wasn't finished. "Honestly," she continued, her voice getting louder, "I don't know why some people can't just blend in appropriately. We worked so hard to make everything perfect." The reception hall seemed to grow quieter around us as more people became aware of the confrontation developing. I could feel dozens of eyes turning in our direction, guests pausing their conversations to watch what was unfolding between the new bride and her mother-in-law. My heart was racing with humiliation, but I tried to maintain my composure. "Madison, I really am sorry about the noise," I said quietly, hoping to end the scene before it escalated further. "I'll just gather my things and head home so you can enjoy the rest of your reception." But instead of accepting my apology and allowing me to leave with dignity, Madison seemed to be gaining momentum. "This is exactly what I was worried about," she said loud enough that I knew people at nearby tables could hear every word. "Some people just don't understand what this kind of event requires." Marcus had noticed the commotion and was making his way toward us, but he moved slowly, as if reluctant to get involved in whatever was happening between his wife and mother. I caught his eye and silently pleaded with him to help defuse the situation, but he seemed frozen between loyalty to his new wife and protection of his mother. "Madison, please," I whispered. "You're making a scene. Let's just forget this happened and let everyone get back to celebrating your beautiful wedding." But my attempt at peacemaking only seemed to fuel her anger. "I'm making a scene," she asked, her voice rising to a level that I knew could be heard across much of the reception hall. "I'm not the one disrupting everything when people are trying to have an elegant evening." The band had stopped playing entirely now, and I could feel the weight of every guest's attention focused on our corner of the room. Madison's bridesmaids were watching with wide eyes, and her parents were moving closer, though I couldn't tell if they intended to support their daughter or calm her down. "Maybe it's better if you just go," Madison said, her words falling into the silence like stones. "This day is supposed to be perfect, and clearly some people can't handle that level of sophistication." The cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. Not only was she humiliating me publicly, but she was also telling me to leave my own son's wedding because my presence was somehow damaging to her perfect day. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the shock of her attack and waiting for someone, anyone, to defend me. Marcus had finally reached our table, but instead of confronting his wife's inappropriate behavior, he stood there looking uncomfortable and conflicted. "Madison, maybe we should just..." he started, but his voice trailed off without finishing the thought. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised to stand up for what was right, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, to show kindness even when it wasn't easy. I waited for him to tell his wife that she was out of line, that she owed me an apology, that no one should treat his mother with such disrespect on what should have been a joyful family occasion. Instead, Marcus looked down at his shoes and said nothing. That silence broke something inside me that I didn't know could be broken. It wasn't just Madison's cruelty that devastated me. In that moment, it was my son's failure to defend me when I needed him most. The boy I had sacrificed everything for, who I had supported through every challenge and celebrated through every success, couldn't find the courage to speak up when his wife publicly humiliated his mother. I picked up my purse, with hands that I was proud to notice weren't shaking, looked once more at Marcus's downturned face, and walked toward the exit without saying another word. Behind me, I could hear the soft murmur of voices as guests processed what they had just witnessed, but I didn't turn around to see their faces. The drive home from the country club felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I sat at red lights, with tears streaming down my face, replaying every moment of Madison's public humiliation and Marcus's devastating silence. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I wasn't just heartbroken about what had happened at the reception. I was furious. I sat in my car outside my small house, the same house where I had raised Marcus with so much love and sacrifice, and forced myself to really think about what had just occurred. Madison hadn't just had a bridezilla moment, or lost her temper under stress. She had deliberately and publicly humiliated me, then demanded that I leave my own son's wedding, and Marcus had let it happen. As I replayed the scene, I realized this wasn't really about a knocked-over chair or disrupting an elegant atmosphere. This was about Madison establishing her dominance in the family hierarchy, making it clear that I no longer had a meaningful place in my son's life. She had chosen the most public possible moment to put me in my place, and she had succeeded in making me feel small and unwanted. But sitting there in my driveway, something shifted inside me. I had spent the past 3 years trying to accommodate Madison's standards, attempting to fit into her world and accepting smaller and smaller roles in my son's life. I had convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself, that being diplomatic was better than being honest about how I was being treated. Now I realized that my attempts at accommodation had been interpreted as weakness. Madison didn't respect my efforts to blend in. She saw them as proof that I was beneath her standards, and Marcus had learned to see me through her eyes as someone whose feelings mattered less than maintaining harmony with his demanding wife. I thought about my friend Linda, who was an estate attorney downtown, and a conversation we had had several months earlier about updating my will. At the time, she had suggested I consider setting up a trust to protect my assets, but I had been more focused on making sure Marcus would inherit everything when I passed away. I wanted him to have financial security, to own the house outright, and to benefit from the investments I had been quietly building over the years. What Marcus didn't know, because I had never felt the need to brag about it, was that his mother wasn't the struggling single parent Madison apparently assumed I was. Yes, I lived modestly and worked at the flower shop, but I had also been investing wisely for 20 years. I owned my house free and clear, had a substantial retirement account, and had quietly acquired 3 rental properties around town that provided steady income. I had learned early in my single motherhood that financial independence was the key to never being powerless again. After Marcus's father left us with nothing, I had sworn that I would never again be dependent on someone else for my security. So I lived below my means, invested carefully, and built wealth slowly but steadily. Marcus knew I was comfortable, but he had never asked about the details of my finances, and I had never volunteered the information. Now I wondered if Madison had made assumptions about my economic status based on my modest lifestyle, and if those assumptions had shaped how she felt entitled to treat me. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that Madison and Marcus had constructed a narrative where they were the successful young couple who might someday need to care for his aging, financially struggling mother. In that story, I was someone to be managed and accommodated, not someone to be respected as an equal adult, with my own resources and independence. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Linda's number. It was nearly 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, but Linda and I had been friends since high school, and I knew she would understand if this was important. "Linda, it's Patsy," I said when she answered. "I know it's late, but I need to ask you about something. Do you remember that conversation we had about setting up a trust and revising my will? I think it's time to have that meeting." Monday morning came with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I woke up early, made coffee in my quiet kitchen, and sat at the same table where I had helped Marcus with homework for 12 years. Instead of feeling sad about the empty space across from me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, the power that comes from making decisions based on my own values, rather than other people's expectations. Linda had agreed to meet me at 9 o'clock to discuss my options. Over the years, she had helped me understand that having money wasn't just about accumulating wealth, but about having choices. Now I was ready to exercise some of those choices in ways that Marcus and Madison had never imagined possible. At Linda's office, I explained what had happened at the wedding and how it had crystallized months of feeling diminished and disrespected. Linda listened without judgment, taking notes and asking practical questions about my intentions. "I want to revise my will completely," I told her. "I want to remove Marcus as my primary beneficiary and establish a trust that will donate most of my assets to organizations that support single mothers getting back on their feet. I also want to cancel the property transfers I had planned to give him as a wedding gift." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Patsy, I understand you're hurt, but these are significant decisions. Are you sure you want to make permanent changes based on what happened yesterday?" I had expected that question, and I had spent the sleepless hours of the night before thinking about my answer. "Linda, this isn't about revenge or punishment," I said. "This is about recognizing that Marcus has made his choice about what kind of relationship he wants with me. If he sees me as someone whose feelings don't matter enough to defend, then he clearly doesn't need my financial support either." We spent 2 hours going through the paperwork, signing documents, and establishing new beneficiaries for accounts that Marcus had always assumed would someday be his. I kept enough in a small inheritance for him to know that I hadn't forgotten he was my son, but the bulk of my estate would now go to causes I believed in, rather than to a son who had proven he wouldn't stand up for me when it mattered. By Tuesday morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had taken concrete action to change my circumstances, rather than simply accepting treatment I didn't deserve. For the first time since the engagement announcement, I felt like I had some control over my own life. That's when Marcus finally called. "Mom, I've been trying to figure out what to say." He began, his voice tentative and apologetic. "I know Madison was out of line at the reception, and I'm sorry about how everything happened. Can we talk about it?" His casual tone suggested he expected this to be a minor bump in our relationship, something that could be smoothed over with a brief conversation, and maybe a promise that Madison would try to be more considerate in the future. "Actually, Marcus, I'm glad you called," I said, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. "I wanted to let you know that I've made some changes to my financial arrangements, and I thought you should be aware of them." There was a pause. "What kind of changes, Mom?" "I've revised my will and cancelled the property transfers I had planned to give you and Madison as a wedding gift. I've also restructured my investments and retirement planning." I kept my tone matter-of-fact, as if I were discussing something as routine as changing my phone plan. "Mom, what are you talking about? What property transfers? What investments?" Marcus sounded genuinely confused, and I realized that Madison's assumptions about my finances had become his assumptions too. "Marcus, did you think I was struggling financially? Did Madison tell you that I might need your help someday?" Another pause, longer this time. "I mean, I knew you were comfortable, but I thought, Madison mentioned that you might appreciate some support as you get older. She said it was normal for adult children to help their parents, and that we should probably start thinking about how to include you in our financial planning." The pieces fell into place with startling clarity. Madison hadn't just dismissed me as socially unsuitable. She had convinced Marcus that I was potentially a financial burden they would need to manage. In her mind, tolerating my presence at family events was a generous gesture towards someone who would someday need their charity. "Marcus, I need you to understand something," I said. "I own property worth more than $800,000. I have retirement savings, life insurance, and investments that have been growing for 20 years. I am not now, nor will I ever be a financial burden on you or anyone else." The silence stretched so long that I thought the call might have been disconnected. Finally, Marcus spoke in a voice I barely recognized. "Mom, I had no idea. Madison said. She said you were probably worried about money, and that we should make sure you knew we'd take care of you when the time came. I thought we were being responsible and caring. And where did Madison get the idea that I needed to be taken care of? I don't know. I guess because you live in the same house and you work at the flower shop and you don't." He trailed off, and I could almost hear him thinking through the implications of what he was learning. "Marcus, I live modestly because I choose to, not because I have to. I work at the flower shop because I enjoy it, not because I need the money. The fact that your wife made assumptions about my circumstances and that you never bothered to actually ask me about my situation tells me everything I need to know about how much you truly value my independence and dignity." "Mom, please, this is all a misunderstanding. If you had known I was financially independent, you would have defended me when Madison humiliated me publicly. Your respect for me was contingent on my bank account balance." I heard him take a shaky breath. "That's not what I meant. I didn't realize. Marcus, you stood there and watched your wife tell me to leave your wedding because I was embarrassing her. You said nothing when she publicly questioned my ability to behave appropriately at a sophisticated event. Whether I have money or not shouldn't change how cruel that was." The conversation continued for another few minutes, with Marcus apologizing and trying to explain, but I could hear that he was still more shocked about learning of my financial situation than he was ashamed of his failure to defend me. That told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and felt truly free for the first time in months. In the weeks that followed, my life took on a rhythm I hadn't experienced since before Marcus got engaged. Without the constant stress of trying to fit into Madison's expectations or worrying about how my presence affected their perfect life, I rediscovered parts of myself that I had forgotten existed. Marcus called every day for the first week, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly frantic as I chose not to answer. His messages revealed more about Madison's reaction to learning about my actual financial situation than about his own remorse for allowing me to be humiliated. Apparently, she was furious about what she called my financial manipulation and accused me of deliberately misleading them about my circumstances. That accusation was so absurd, it almost made me laugh. I had never lied about my finances. I simply hadn't bragged about them. The fact that Madison interpreted my modesty as deception said more about her assumptions and entitlement than it did about my character. The one call from Madison came 10 days after the wedding. She demanded to know why I was punishing Marcus for a simple misunderstanding and accused me of using money to control people. I listened to her rant for about 30 seconds before hanging up. I had no interest in explaining basic human decency to someone who thought public humiliation was acceptable behavior. With my family drama behind me, I began to focus on possibilities I had been putting on hold for years. I booked a cruise to Alaska that I had been dreaming about since retirement became financially feasible. I signed up for a watercolor painting class at the community center. I even created an online dating profile for the first time since my divorce, figuring that at 58, I might still have time for romance if I met the right person. Most surprisingly, I discovered that I enjoyed my own company more than I had expected. For years, I had defined myself primarily as Marcus's mother, measuring my success by his happiness and accomplishments. Now, I was learning to think of myself as Patsy, first a complete person with interests and goals that had nothing to do with my role as a parent. The rental properties that Marcus had never known about were doing well, providing steady income that allowed me to reduce my hours at the flower shop to part-time. I used the extra time to volunteer at a women's shelter downtown, helping other single mothers navigate the practical challenges of rebuilding their lives after difficult circumstances. Working with those women reminded me of my own strength and resilience. I had survived a devastating divorce, raised a son alone, built financial security through careful planning, and maintained my independence through decades of challenges. Madison's attempt to diminish me had failed because I knew my own worth even when others couldn't see it. 6 months after the wedding, I ran into Marcus at the grocery store. It was unavoidable. We ended up in the same checkout line, and he looked so startled to see me that he nearly dropped his basket. He looked tired, older than his 26 years, and I felt a familiar maternal pang of concern before reminding myself that he was an adult who had made his choices. "Mom," he said quietly, "how have you been?" "I've been very well, Marcus. Thank you for asking. I kept my tone polite but not warm the way I might speak to a friendly acquaintance. I've been wanting to talk to you about everything that happened. I realize now how wrong Madison was, and how wrong I was not to defend you. Our marriage has been difficult since I started seeing things more clearly. I felt sorry for him, but not sorry enough to rescue him from the consequences of his choices. I'm sorry you're having problems, Marcus, but that's between you and your wife. You both showed me who you are when it mattered, and I've adjusted my expectations accordingly. What does that mean? It means I've learned to build my happiness on foundations that don't depend on how other people choose to treat me. It's been a valuable lesson. We parted that day with a polite goodbye, and I realized I felt sadness, but not longing. I missed the son I had raised, but I didn't miss the man he had chosen to become. Some relationships can't be repaired once trust is fundamentally broken, and trying to pretend otherwise only leads to more disappointment. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had learned that self-respect wasn't selfish, that boundaries weren't cruelty, and that walking away from people who couldn't value me was an act of wisdom, not weakness. The cruise to Alaska was magnificent. I met a retired teacher named Robert, who made me laugh and treated me with the kind of easy respect I had forgotten was possible. We've been corresponding since the trip, and he's planning to visit next month. I'm nervous and excited in ways that remind me I'm still capable of new beginnings. I never thought I'd thank my daughter-in-law for anything, but she taught me something invaluable. My worth isn't determined by how others treat me. It's determined by how I allow myself to be treated. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is letting them face the consequences of their choices, and sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your dignity? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences about family relationships and finding strength in unexpected places. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your self-worth. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect by the people who claim to love you. Until next time, be kind to yourselves and each other.